Each year, film nuts the world over look forward to the Academy Awards. It's a celebration each year of the films that inspired us, that changed us, films that represent who we are, or where we are going. Okay, yeah, let's cut the crap. It's a popularity club of the people who are in and the people who are out in Hollywood. But it wasn't always that way. Just talking popularity in the box office, we've had several highest grossing films of their time win the award for Best Picture. Today, films that aren't even widely released in theaters can win Best Picture. In the last 2 years, the Oscars have replicated a formula that they had back in the late 30s and early 40s, a straight 10 list of the best films of the year. However, from 1944 to 2008, only 5 films each year had the distinction of being nominated. Now, don't get me wrong, I love a competition, but since the Academy changed the rules back to having 10 films, or up to 10 films like they did from 2011 to 2020, it's great to see films like Dallas Buyers Club, Whiplash, Hell or High Water, Call Me By Your Name, Jojo Rabbit, Ford v Ferrari, and The Father be included in the list. It's arguable, since none of these films made the list for Best Director in their respective years, that they wouldn't have made the cut for Best Picture if there were only 5 slots. For me, the sliding scale of 5 to 10 films was perfect. It meant you could nominate more films than 5, but it also meant you weren't forced to pick 10, even if 1 or 2 or like 4 were not films that had the stuff to be Best Picture nominees, at least in the view of the general public. So to prove that point, I have a little experiment I'd like to share with you. A what-if scenario, if you will. Ask yourself, if the Academy had had a solid 10 films nominated each year, what movies from the past would have made the cut? Which films that scored multiple nominations, or at least a Best Director nomination, that could, or historically should have been nominated, would have had that honor? Now, for me personally, the 40s and 50s is a weak spot for my filmography, so maybe one day we can circle back and hit 1944 to 1959. But from 1960 to 2008, I went back and looked over each year's Academy offerings. Keep in mind, this is a what-if scenario, but it's a what-if scenario based on a few ground rules. First of all, as we've seen in the last couple years with the Academy, every film that was up for Best Director was also up for Best Picture. Historically, there's dozens of films out there that were nominees for their director, but missed out on the Best Picture nomination, the last example being Another Round in 2020. So each Best Director nominee pretty much gets an automatic bid in this what-if scenario, though I can point out that some years there could have been a case where the overall Academy might just not have been behind a certain film. There have been a few times when a film has been up for Best Director, but nothing else. And even in this scenario, I'll point out where even in those cases, 10 slots weren't enough to include that particular film. Second of all, we're basing this around films that were nominees. While a lot of people would historically love to go back to films like The Searchers, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, The Shining, Heat, or more recent films like The Farewell or Uncut Gems, and give them Oscar nominations galore. But in this what-if scenario, we're not going to bring in a film like that to crash the party and out of nowhere suddenly received unabashed love from the Academy. That's a video for another day. So the films that will fill this video, and others in this series, will be films that were nominated for at least one Academy Award, and could have earned at least one more nomination, the most coveted of all, Best Picture. Now that I've got that lengthy intro out of the way, let's get into the last decade that only held 5 nominees a year, the aughts, and just go from 2000 to 2008 and see which films could have been nominated for Best Picture if the Academy was more generous. The first year in film of the new millennium was actually pretty solid. At the Oscars, it was a huge night for Gladiator, which went into the ceremony with the most nominations at 12 and ended up taking home 5 Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Actor, and both Traffic and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon took home 4. Oscar nuts will grill me if I don't mention this, but keep in mind that Soderbergh was nominated twice that year in directing, for Traffic, which he won for, and Erin Brockovich, which did win an Oscar for Julia Roberts' performance. All 3 made the list for Best Picture, and rounding out the category was Erin Brockovich and Chocolat. Elsewhere in the Oscar field, we had Stephen Daldry nominated for directing Billy Elliot, but it failed to land a Best Picture nomination, though it only landed 2 other nominations, one in acting and one in writing, so it would easily have been the 6th nominee for Best Picture. It's hard not to say that Almost Famous, which had 4 nominations, would have been left off the list as well, so let's call that Best Picture nominee number 7, especially since it ended up taking home the award for Best Original Screenplay. After that, there are two films that I think would have made the list, both of which had 3 nominations: The Patriot and Wonder Boys. The Patriot feels like an epic, and war films, as we all know, are easy gets for Best Picture. And Wonder Boys had a screenplay and an editing nomination, categories that usually overlap with Best Picture. That 10th slot, however, is a bit trickier. It could have been Castaway, which only landed 2 nominations, Best Actor and Best Sound, but it's from a previous Best Picture winner, Robert Zemeckis, and stars a 2-time Oscar winner, Tom Hanks. You also had The Contender, which only landed a couple of acting nominations, but had the pedigree to be named a Best Picture nominee, and You Can Count on Me, which was up for Screenplay and Best Actress. So any one of these 3 could have been the final nominee. For myself, I'd probably pick Castaway, but that's with hindsight being 2020, and the fact that it was a box office hit, and was more widely seen than the other 2. Next up, Ron Howard got his revenge for not being nominated for Apollo 13 with wins for A Beautiful Mind. It actually trailed the first entry in the Lord of the Rings trilogy for most nominations that night. Fellowship of the Ring had 13, but A Beautiful Mind and Moulin Rouge tied for second most with 8 nominations each. At the show, Mind did take home 4 awards to top off the evening, all in major categories: Best Supporting Actress, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Picture. Fellowship ended up taking home 4 awards, all in technical categories, and Moulin Rouge also only took home prizes in the tech categories, 2 wins for that film. In the Bedroom and Gosford Park rounded out the Best Picture lineup. Up for Best Director that year, but not Best Picture, were also Ridley Scott and David Lynch, for Black Hawk Down and Mulholland Drive, respectively. Black Hawk Down, being another war film and earning 4 nominations without Best Picture, it's no stretch to see it joining the crowd. Mulholland Drive, on the other hand, is the latest film to only receive a Best Director nomination with no other support. This is one of those cases where I'll say, even with 10 nominees in 2001, Mulholland Drive probably would not have gotten one of those slots. It's possible, but I'll say there were at least 5 films ahead of it. One of those is Amelie, which earned 5 nominations but couldn't crack picture, acting, or directing nominations. I say it would have been the 7th nominee that year. For the next one up, I might surprise some of you, but Shrek was not only a massive hit at the box office and with critics, but it had earned a number of nominations through the awards season and ended up winning Best Animated Feature and was a Screenplay nominee. I say it would have been a Best Picture nominee with more spots open. Iris was only a player in the acting categories and did win for Supporting Actor, but I can see that one getting to Best Picture. That 10th slot would likely have gone to either Training Day, which again scored exclusively in the acting categories, though Denzel won Best Actor that year, or Ali, which was in the same boat, actually nominated in the same categories, but came from Michael Mann, a previous Oscar nominee for The Insider. Given that it's a biopic from a previous nominee and also had a lot of clout that year, I'll give the edge to Ali for the 10th slot. "2002 was a spoil of riches for Oscar fans. It was a hard year predicting which films were in and which would not make the cut for Best Picture with 5 slots. This kind of awards year was a prime example of why I made this video. I'm not joking, 7 films that I'm about to talk about all legitimately could have been nominees, and some could have made the cut another year if we were stuck on just 5 nominees. 2002 was the year of Chicago, which led all films with 13 nominations and took home 6 prizes, including Best Supporting Actress and Best Picture in the top categories. The Pianist was also a major player, taking home Best Director, Best Actor, and Best Adapted Screenplay. The Hours, Gangs of New York, and The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers were also players for Best Picture. Talk to Her was the only Best Director nominee to fall short of Best Picture that year, and unlike Lynch the year before, Almodovar's film was also up for Best Original Screenplay, and won in that category. For our purposes, let's put it aside for just a moment, as there were a few films that I think would have ranked ahead of it. One of those is Adaptation, which was up for 4 awards, all in screenplay and acting, and took home the prize for Supporting Actor with Chris Cooper. Also with 2 nominations was Catch Me If You Can, which was a box office hit and came from the ever-dependable Steven Spielberg, so I'll list it as the 7th pick. Frida, which earned 6 Oscar nominations, was kept out of picture and directing, but in this scenario I'll call it the 8th Best Picture nominee. Including Talk to Her, 4 films could have been nominees number 9 and 10. Since we've already highlighted that one, what about Road to Perdition? It was Sam Mendes' follow-up to American Beauty, 1999's Best Picture winner, and while it scored almost exclusively in the technical categories, Paul Newman was a nominee in Best Supporting Actor. With 6 nominations, it's hard to see that one not land a slot. You also had About Schmidt, another film that played only in the acting categories, though the Golden Globes that year had nominated it for directing, writing, and film. Personally, I love this movie, so I might be a little biased, but I think in a less competitive year, it would have earned more than just Jack Nicholson and Kathy Bates nominations-wise. Finally, there's Far From Heaven, a movie that also felt like it would have gotten more attention without films like The Hours or Gangs of New York or The Pianist in the way. It settled on 4 nominations, though 2 of those nominations were above the line, that is to say, screenplay on up. So yeah, this is a tough choice, but I'll give the edge to Far From Heaven and... I can't do it, folks. Sam, you had fun in '99, but you would have had to settle for 6 nominations in 2002. About Schmidt is my number 10. As Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy came to a close, Oscar history was repeated, with 11 wins going to the movie. And I always like to brag that the other 2 films that scored 11 wins, Ben-Hur and Titanic, lost some of their nominations, and Return of the King went 11 for 11. It should be the tiebreaker and be called the winningest film in Academy history. Again, there might be some bias from me, but oh well. Just in the top categories, it took Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Picture. In addition to Return of the King, Best Picture included Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, Lost in Translation, Mystic River, and Seabiscuit. City of God from Fernando Meirelles was up for directing, but missed out on a picture nomination. Unlike a couple of our more recent directing nominees who missed the Best Picture train, I will say City of God will be included in my lineup of 10 films this time, seeing as it was also up for Adapted Screenplay, Best Film Editing, and Best Cinematography. Anthony Minghella's Cold Mountain undoubtedly would have made the cut as well, landing 7 nominations, 2 in acting categories and 5 in technical categories. Plus, coming from a previous Oscar winner doesn't hurt, nor being a war film and an epic, and one of those 2 acting categories actually being a win for Renee Zellweger. I'll put another animated film in the lineup this year as well, Finding Nemo, which scored 4 nominations, including a screenplay nod. The last 2 slots could have been filled by more blockbuster entertainment. You had Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl land 5 nominations, including 1 in an acting category, and being a box office smash doesn't hurt either. Then there was Edward Zwick's The Last Samurai, which had 1 fewer nomination, but was a war epic, and like Black Pearl, also had an acting nomination at its side. Then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you had 2 films that had no technical nominations and only played above the line. Jim Sheridan's In America had 2 acting nominations and was up for Best Original Screenplay. Then Alejandro Iñárritu's 21 Grams could also have surprised with the Best Picture slot, as it not only had 2 acting nominations, but also starred our Best Actor winner, Sean Penn, though he won for Mystic River. I'll split the difference here. In America would be nominee number 9, and I'll give the edge to Last Samurai, as that one had a bit more of a serious tone, and Zwick's previous films, Legends of the Fall and Glory, both had their share of Oscar love. The 2004 Academy Awards were a showdown between Martin Scorsese and Clint Eastwood, The Aviator vs. Million Dollar Baby, and once again the Academy bet on Clint, giving his film 4 wins, including Best Director, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, and Best Picture. The Aviator bested Baby both in the race for most nominations, 11 for The Aviator, while Million Dollar Baby tied with Finding Neverland for second most with 7 each, and in the wins column with 5 wins, including 1 for Cate Blanchett in Supporting Actress. Ray and Sideways were the remaining Best Picture nominees. Mike Leigh was able to crack the Best Director lineup for Vera Drake this year, but the film didn't land a picture nom. While it only scored an acting and screenplay nomination otherwise, I think it would be nominee number 6. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, the last non-Best Picture nominee to win a screenplay prize, while only otherwise landing a nomination for Kate Winslet, I still say would have made the list. Closer, a film that played in acting categories only, I also give an edge to because it's from Mike Nichols, a previous Oscar winner. Though it should be said, the film got a lot of support through the season despite being shut out at the Screen Actors Guild Awards. The last 2 slots, I think, would have been fought out between 3 films, The Incredibles, Hotel Rwanda, and The Passion of the Christ. Incredibles, I think, easily makes number 9, as Pixar films were, at the time, usually included as some of the more lauded films of the year, on top of also being big moneymakers. The number 10 slot, oof, let's see. Hotel Rwanda was up for 2 acting awards and original screenplay, while Passion of the Christ was only up for 2 technical awards, but came from Oscar winner Mel Gibson. History being what it is, I know some folks out there would easily give it to Rwanda, but since Gibson hadn't had his big blow-ups yet, I have to say at the time the Academy would have likely given the edge to Passion. Ah, yes, the infamous crash over Brokeback Mountain year. Yeah, we won't get too far into that, but it seemed like Brokeback, which led all films with 8 nominations, had a bit of an advantage. Crash was stuck tied for second most nominations with Good Night and Good Luck and non-Best Picture nominee Memoirs of a Geisha. The night of the ceremony, both films won 3 Oscars, with Crash taking Best Original Screenplay and Best Picture, and Brokeback Mountain taking Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Director. Capote and Munich were our other 2 picture nominees, and all 5 films were up for Best Director, so the other 5 films this year will have to come from support in other categories. I feel like 4 other films would have been easy gets for Best Picture if there were more slots. Walk the Line, for example, scored 5 nominations, including an acting win for Reese Witherspoon, but failed to crack Picture or Director. Memoirs of a Geisha we've already mentioned, and even though all those nominations came in technical categories, again we had Spielberg's name attached, at least as a producer. I think it easily would have cleared Best Picture. The Constant Gardener was another film that earned 4 nominations, including an acting win and a screenplay nomination, and would have made the cut. Lastly, for the easy bets comes Cinderella Man from Academy Award winner Ron Howard, and it was up for Best Film Editing, an acting prize, and a makeup prize as well. The 10th slot is really open. Another adaptation of Jane Austen was there with Pride and Prejudice, though it couldn't even crack the screenplay category. You also had Hustle and Flow, which only earned nominations in acting and song, the latter of which it won for, but it feels like one that could have cracked the list. I think, though, I gotta give the nod to Syriana, which won George Clooney an Oscar for supporting actor and was up for screenplay as well. This is another film like in 2002 that I think could have cracked Best Picture if we were stuck with 5 nominees and films like Capote or Good Night and Good Luck had missed. "2006 was the year that film fans saw their beloved Martin Scorsese finally pick up a competitive Oscar for The Departed. It won 4 of its 5 nominations, with Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Director for Scorsese, and Best Picture. Babel, Letters from Iwo Jima, Little Miss Sunshine, and The Queen rounded out Best Picture that year. Paul Greengrass was recognized for directing United 93, which only otherwise earned a nomination for its editing. I do see it being a Best Picture nominee with more slots, but believe it or not, I would rank Dreamgirls ahead of it for this video. And also, believe it or not, it was the first time a film led the nominations, but failed to secure Best Director and Best Picture nominations. Rough day for Bill Condon and company for sure, especially after Chicago captured the same feat 4 years earlier, though remember that one had 13 nominations total, whereas Dreamgirls landed 8. So for those of you keeping score at home, I put Dreamgirls at number 6, with United 93 being number 7 for Best Picture nominees this year. An easy pick in retrospect would have been Pan's Labyrinth, which took home 3 Oscars, half of its 6 nominations, which were mostly in technical categories, though being up for Best Foreign Language Film and Original Screenplay were noticeable. For the 9th and 10th slots, I'm going to go with 2 films that had children in the title, Children of Men and Little Children, both of which earned 3 nominations, including a screenplay nod for both. I will note that Blood Diamond and Notes on a Scandal also earned 5 and 4 nominations respectively, and could have broken into Best Picture as well, but I see them falling short even with 10 slots. For the penultimate year before the Academy switched back to a solid 10 nominees for Best Picture, it was the Coen brothers' time to shine, with No Country for Old Men earning 8 nominations, tying with There Will Be Blood that year for most nominations, and took home half of those, including Best Director, Best Supporting Actor, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Picture. Blood took home a couple of awards, one of them for Best Actor. Juno, Atonement, and Michael Clayton also vied for Best Picture that year, a strong lineup, but there were 8 other films out there that year that earned the right to be in the race. We'll start with The Diving Bell and The Butterfly, which was the only directing nominee that year to fall short of Best Picture. It was also up for 3 more Oscars, including Screenplay, Cinematography, and Editing, so it's hard to say it wouldn't have been nominee number 6. La Vie en Rose earned 2 wins, one of which was Best Actress, and while its only other nomination was in a tech category, I feel it would have had the strength to be a Best Picture nominee. Another one for me in this category is Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. For me, I frickin' love this movie, so my bias is sneaking back in. But with an acting nomination and a win in production design, I see it bleeding over into Best Picture as well, being nominee number 8. And Ratatouille, I see being another Pixar winner that could have been up for picture. Now for number 10, wow. I could go with American Gangster, which was coming from Ridley Scott, who'd been up for Best Director twice in the same decade, though this wasn't his strongest performance with the Academy. I could also pick Charlie Wilson's War, the last film from Mike Nichols, another Academy favorite, or Into the Wild, which earned an acting nomination and an editing nomination. But I think I'm going to go with the film that swept all three of its categories and came from a Best Director nominee the previous year. That's right, Bourne Ultimatum. Our final year of only 5 nominees for Best Picture was another one of some controversy. No doubt, Slumdog Millionaire was the favorite that year, earning 10 nominations and 8 wins, including Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Director, and Best Picture. The Curious Case of Benjamin Button led nominations with 13, and did win 3 Oscars, but none of them were in the top 8 categories. The other 3 Best Picture nominees were The Reader, Milk, and Frost Nixon. Again, all 5 Best Director nominees were repeats here from Picture, so no odd man out. So yeah, let's skip right to the one everyone knows would undoubtedly be number 6 this year, and arguably the most obvious choice in any year between 1944 and 2008 that would have made the list if more than 5 films were chosen each year: The Dark Knight. Many speculate the failure on the Academy's part of not nominating the film for Best Picture or Director or even Screenplay, all worthy nominations, was what led to the Academy expanding the picture field. And yeah, it goes without saying, but it also kicks ass and transcends the very genre in which it's pegged into because of its source material. Without spending way too much time on it, it was time for the Academy to be okay with honoring a great movie that just happened to be a Batman movie. I put it in the same camp as Star Trek II, a movie that's so damn good that you can sometimes forget it's part of a major franchise. The Wrestler and Doubt make nominees number 7 and 8 for me, respectively. Both earned multiple acting nominations and seem to fit the mold of a Best Picture nominee. Wall-E, I think, would have continued the trend we've seen of Pixar movies breaking into Best Picture, fitting since the next 2 years, both Up and Toy Story 3 actually did earn Picture nominations. For number 10, I'm stuck between Revolutionary Road and Changeling. Both earned 3 nominations each, including an acting bid and 2 technical nominations each. I have to give favoritism again toward Clint Eastwood though, and name him over Sam Mendes, twice in this video, sorry Sam, and pick Changeling as the number 10 Best Picture nominee. So, there you have it. Lots of discussion to be had, I'm sure, and don't get me wrong, I've tried my best to be as objective as possible here when it comes to films that just had a really high nomination count outside of Best Picture earning spots. There were some times when bias came into it, but only once in a while. Anyone who thinks I'm crazy, go ahead and add a comment down below. I'll be sure not to read it. But who knows, maybe there was a film or two that did earn a nomination or multiple that you feel was more into the Oscar race than some of the choices I picked. Next time, we're going back a little further into a great decade of film, the 1970s.